Recording. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Colleen Aversa. I'm with Winsor and Newton. I'll be your moderator today. And I'm joined today by artist Mandy Peltier, who will be instructing you on how to create this beautiful and vibrant hibiscus bloom using colors from the Winsor and Newton Cotman Watercolor Sketchers Pocket Box. Say that 10 times fast, I dare you. So before we get started, as Kelly mentioned, I just want to remind everyone this class is being recorded. So if you're just hanging out with us today and watching, you want to paint another time, or if you feel like you missed something while painting along, you can always rewatch this class and pause and play at your leisure. There was a sketch outline provided for this class on the sign-up page, as well as your email. But just in case you missed it, in a few minutes, I'll drop it in the chat for you if you want to download and print it out for today. Also, keep your eye on the chat throughout the class, as we will be posting some links and information there that you might find helpful. And if you have any questions, just pop them on there and we'll do our best to get them answered for you. So that's it for me. Now for the fun part, I'll hand it over to Mandy.
Thank you, Colleen. And hi, everyone. I'm Mandy Peltier, and I'm your artist and instructor today. And today's class is going to be a little more fast-paced because we have a lot of layers to get through. It's a more realistic looking piece, but I hope you learn a lot of fun techniques. And I think this project kind of builds upon classes I've already taught, but I'm going to go ahead and share my other camera so we can just get rolling with this hibiscus. All right, so I always start with an overhead view. I'm going to go over the supplies super quick today. You should have an artist palette, the Cotman Sketchers Pocket Box set. We're going to use masking fluid today, and we're going to use a toothpick to apply the masking fluid, glass of water, graphite pencil, and eraser if you haven't already drawn the outline. I'm using 3 brushes today. I normally try to keep it at 1 or 2, but today we need 3. So we'll be using the 0, the 2, and the 6 round brush. I'm using Cotman brushes. And then I have this heat gun here because to kind of speed along the process or to speed along natural drying time, we may need to use this in 1 part or 2 parts to ensure that we can get this finished in the hour. So this is the project we're working on today. This is a red hibiscus. I chose red since 4th of July is right around the corner. And you can see this is a pretty detailed, more realistic looking blossom. It's not necessarily loose style. So we're going to achieve this detailed look by using lots of layers and lots of details. And we're going to kind of develop a bit of an underpainting today. And it might seem strange to you, the first few steps that we're doing, and it may not seem like everything's going to come together in the end, but I promise you it will. Just bear with me, and I'll try to explain things as we go. So we are going to get started by drawing the outline. So I'm going to set aside everything I need other than what I need to draw the outline. And that would involve my graphite pencil and my eraser, my 8x10 sheet of cold press watercolor paper. I failed to mention I'm using the Winsor & Newton professional paper today. Definitely when you're doing layered detailed pieces, using 100% cotton paper is going to work better for you. It's going to be in your favor to use a professional paper for detailed watercolor pieces. All right, so I'm going to also pull over my outline here because I like to sketch my outlines with the actual outline right next to me because I'm better able to gauge what I'm doing and drawing what I see. So I'm going to start by drawing the style of the hibiscus, which are 2 curved lines, one on top of the other with maybe just a 1/16 of an inch spacing between them. So I'm going to start the top of the 2 lines sort of in the middle of the paper, and I'm just going to kind of curve it down and back up. And then I'm going to draw on another one, and I'm going to have to turn my work, I think, to make sure I can judge my spacing. And then on top of the style are pads. So off of the main style, there's 2 little ovals right next to each other. So I'm going to draw those, just 2 small ovals. And then there's another little shoot that kind of comes off the style. So I'm going to draw 2 parallel lines, just real little, and then 2 pads off of that. So here's our starting point. And now I'm just going to draw each individual petal. I'm going to start with the petal that's kind of tucked behind the whole style, and I'm just going to draw what I see here. So I am going to start kind of just above the style, and the good news is these petals don't have to look exactly like you see on the outline, and they shouldn't be perfectly round petals. They should have a bit of movement and squiggles to them. So if you have a hard time drawing a straight line, you're in luck because today you don't have to. And then I'm just going to keep working my way around. I'm going to start the next petal under the style, connect it to the one I just drew on, and I'm just working my way around, drawing what I see, drawing each petal with a bit of movement and wave to it. And I can make adjustments after I get this initial one in. And then the last one here, and then connect that to the first one I drew on. All right, so I'm going to make a couple adjustments here. I might make this one just a little bit bigger so it looks a little bit more like the outline, and maybe do the same thing to this one. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw on all of the veins or folds that are on each petal. I'm going to just try and draw what I see. If I can't squeeze every single one on, it's not going to be a big deal. It's not going to affect the overall finished project. So I'm just going to draw on all these little veins and folds as I see them on each petal. They're mostly parallel lines or Y-shaped markings or even V-shaped markings. So just draw on approximately what you see and where you see it. And the reason why we're drawing these on is this is going to be a guide for us for where we're going to place our veins and our folds. And we kind of want to use this as a guide and stick to these markings that we place on to keep the hibiscus from looking a little too busy. If you kind of just eyeball all your veins with your brush, you may end up adding maybe more than the hibiscus needs, or it might just look too layered. So I'm putting them in just so I can kind of use them as a guide. And we're adding so many layers today that your graphite pencil markings will be pretty well hidden by the time we're done today. They're not going to be showing as much as some of my more loose, quick pieces. So that's the good news. And I might even further define the edges between petals so I can see the separation between petals, but I'll do that after I get all these little veins in. So I'm just drawing parallel lines, V's and Y's to put in all these veins and folds on each petal. And I'm not able to fit on every single one I see on the outline. So if you want your hibiscus to look just like the outline, you'll want to either draw it freehand after the class is over when you can really take your time, or just trace it. But today, since I'm freehanding it, it's not going to look perfect. So I actually am going to darken up just the lines that are in between each petal, because that's going to come in handy in a little bit so that I can see where one petal begins and another petal ends. All right. And then the last step to drawing the outline are the leaves. So I'm going to start by just drawing a basic leaf shape. So 2 curved lines that meet at a point and mirror each other. And then I'll draw the little toothy parts, the little sharp points on the leaves. Hibiscus leaves are not smooth, they're kind of toothy. So I'm going to go back down to the starting point and go up and then down, up and then down, up and then down, and then meet it at the point. And then I'll mirror that on the other side, up and then down, up and down, up and down, and then meet it at a point. And then I'll draw on the veins on this leaf that I see on the outline. And this will also be a good guide for me as we make this project. And then I'm going to repeat that for my other little leaf. So I know this is really fast and some of you do not sketch this fast. So if I am moving a little quick for you, I would encourage you to do one of 2 things. Either just watch this class and follow along with what I'm doing by watching, and then try to complete this project when this class is posted to the Michael Store YouTube channel, and you can rewatch and pause as needed. Or maybe just do 1 leaf with me and 2 or 3 petals, and then you can complete the other half when the class is done. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to place masking fluid on this style, on these pads, and also we're going to apply some to the anthers and filament. So I'm going to set this aside now because we're done. And I'm going to pull down my masking fluid and my toothpick. And I'm going to open up my masking fluid. And I like to work with my masking fluid by pouring a little bit of it into the cap versus pulling directly from the bottle. Now you have to be careful that you don't spill the bottle. And if you were in my class on Tuesday, you saw I can be a bit of a klutz. So I'm going to set my bottle aside so I don't accidentally knock it over. And then I'm going to take my toothpick, and I'm going to take 1 point of the toothpick, and I'm just going to move it up and down into my cap, just to kind of help it build up a little bit of base of masking fluid. It makes it a little bit easier to apply when you do that. And I am going to apply this to the entire style on the hibiscus, and I'll just put more on my toothpick as I need. Now, masking fluid moves or dries a little bit quickly. So while you don't need to put this on in lightning speed, I kind of pull my toothpick over where I had just ended into where I'm applying it fresh, just to kind of keep it moving and to keep it from drying too fast. So
really quickly, as you're doing the masking fluid, I just wanted to see, some people are saying they missed that on the supplies or they just don't have any. Is there any other tips that they could, if they didn't have any, to do that?
Okay, so if you don't have masking fluid, you could try rubber cement if you have that. You could grab that, but otherwise you'll just want to work really carefully around where we're applying the masking fluid to not apply paint there, essentially. So, because I'll show you what we're doing. We're applying it to this whole style because masking fluid protects the paper from receiving paint. So that way we can just apply color over it and not have to worry about these areas absorbing the paint. Same with these little yellow dots. We're going to place masking fluid where the pollen is. So if you don't have masking fluid, you'll just have to carefully work around those areas. But I would recommend you get some masking fluid. And so maybe you could just even not do this petal, but do all the others and then just watch and learn what it does and how to use it. All right, and then I'm also going to apply some masking fluid to the pads that are attached to my center style. And now these yellow little dots, these are the anthers or the pollen. So they're both above and below the style. So I'm going to take my toothpick and I'm going to hold it basically straight up and down. And I'm going to place small dots above the style and below the style. I'm not really counting, I'm just doing it randomly, but I'm trying not to do any dots that touch the style because when we go to paint these sections, the yellow of the pollen could bleed into the red of the style. So I'm placing some above and some below, but try not to have any actually touch the style. All right, so that's all we're using the masking fluid for. It's just to protect those parts. So I'm going to carefully pour what's left in my cap back into my bottle and tighten that up so I don't have any accidents. All right. And while that dries, we're going to mix our first two colors that we're going to apply to the petals. So I'm going to set this aside. And I am going to pull my Skechers Pocket Box set down, my artist palette, my water, and my number 6 brush. And so we are going to, I see a question, can you use a white crayon? Yeah, you could do that. A white crayon could be a good resist in place of the masking fluid. Yes, good question there. Okay, so I'm taking my number 6, I'm stirring it in the water to help those bristles absorb the water. And then I'm going to use my brush as if it were a spoon, and I am going to place 4 scoops of water into 2 wells on my palette. So literally just like a spoon, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to make a couple mixtures that are a little bit more water than they are paint. I don't want to quite call them washes because they're not super watered down, but they're definitely not an equal paint to water ratio like what I normally work with. They're more water than they are paint. So I am going to make the first one orange. So I'm going to use this cadmium red pale hue or orange that's in your set. And I'm going to do 1 pass into the first well on my palette. And by pass, I mean, I'm going to take my wet brush, I'm going to run it into that color, and then I'm going to stir it into those 4 drops of water and then wipe it on the edge of my palette to release excess paint from my brush. That is 1 pass. And I am going to do that 2 more times. So 1, 2, all right, and then I am going to clean my brush. I'm going to blot it on my paper towels over here. And into this next one, I am going to do 3 passes of the Alizarin Crimson. So we did 4 drops of water and we're doing 3 passes of paint. So it is going to be a little bit more water than paint, but we don't want them to be super desaturated. We do want them to still have some color to it. All right, so we have an orange and we have a red, and I'm going to explain what we're going to do. So we're going to work this entire step 1 petal at a time. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to apply the orange paint to the entire petal, and I'm going to try not to have so much paint on the paper that it puddles. So I want to just have a nice even coverage where it almost looks like a frozen lake, just kind of glass-like. And then what I'm going to do while the orange is still wet and starting to set into the paper, I'm going to apply the red over all of the veins, and it will bleed out and it will be thick, and that's okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the wipe technique that I demonstrated on my class on Tuesday, but I'll show you that when we get there. So I'm using the number 6 brush, the same brush that I used to mix my colors. I'm going to put some orange on my brush, and I'm going to start on this lower left petal, and I'm going to apply this orange, not quite wash, but also not equal paint to water ratio mixture to the entire petal. And I'm trying to move it around as best I can so that I don't have any puddles forming. And I'm just using the tip of my brush to put more paint on my brush versus putting my whole brush into that color, because I don't want any puddles to form, or it's not going to give us the right effect when we go in with the red and then when we go into lift color. So I have this first petal covered with some orange, and you can see there's no puddles. It's just a even layer of color. And then I'll swish my brush in the water. I'll blot it on the paper towel. I'll put a little bit of red on my brush. And then I'm going to start at the tips of the petals and work my way towards the center of the hibiscus. And I'm just going to, with the tip of my number 6 brush, just paint over those lines I drew for every single indentation or fold on the petal. And it will add a little bit of red, but it'll also kind of turn it red-orange because it's blending in with the orange. And so we're just starting to build an underpainting for this project. And then to remind you how to lift, or if you weren't here on Tuesday, I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to blot it several times on my paper towel so that my brush is wet, but not soaking wet. And then I'm going to run it in between several of the veins to lift value. So I'm going to literally drag it in between a couple of the veins, and then I'll turn my brush a little bit and do it in between a couple more veins. And you don't have to do this lift technique in between every vein, but this kind of helps us from the very beginning get some shape and form. So I'm going to hold that up so you can see. And if you missed this the first time, I am going to demo it again. All right, so I'm going to take orange. I'm going to apply it in its entirety to the next petal. So this first step is 3-part. It's orange wash to a petal. And then we take the red and we apply it over all the veins. And then we use a clean but slightly damp brush to lift the values in between some of the veining on each petal. All right, and it's just important that we get a nice even wash of orange on that petal so we don't have any puddles going on. We are going to have that happen later on in this project, just not yet. And in between each color, I'm cleaning my brush, I'm blotting it, and now I'm going to use my red and I'm going to apply that to all of the folds and veins. So this may seem like a weird way to start, not just going in with red, but I'm going to explain here in just a second why we're doing this. So I'm going to now lift. So I'm cleaning my brush, blotting it, and I'm just going to drag my clean brush with no paint on it in between some of the veins and folds on this petal to lift some of the color. And I'm turning my brush every time I lift a little bit more. All right, so it's just subtle. And if this is not working for you, I would try using a professional paper. I don't think this technique works as well on student grade paper. I think it works a lot better on 100% cotton professional paper, which is why I'm using the Winsor & Newton professional paper today. It just takes, I find a lot of times student grade paper, it absorbs color unevenly and it kind of beads the watercolor. Whereas 100% cotton paper allows the paint to more evenly absorb into the paper and gives you a lot more flexibility. So I would invest in good paper if you're not using professional paper here. All right, so I'm going to blot my brush and now I'm going to do the red veins. So as I finish these last few petals, let me explain why we're doing this. Okay, so I could just go in with red and just start with red, but I don't think I would be able to build up a dynamic enough looking hibiscus to where it looks really vibrant and pretty. And orange is a secondary color. It is made by mixing the 2 primaries, yellow and red. So there is some red in the orange, but there's also yellow, and yellow mimics the color of light. So a lot of times when I am painting fruit or even vegetables, I'll start with an underpainting of yellow because some of that yellow is still going to peek through on my final piece and just really bring some light to the piece. So I'm kind of shortcutting that today by using some orange. So some little bits of orange are still going to kind of peek through the final hibiscus and just add some nice dimension to it than what just red alone could. So that's why we're using red. And this is really just kind of part of the underpainting where we're just kind of developing that base layer of color, give us a good foundation to work with, working toward good values from the very beginning. All right, so I'm working my way around. If we were using pencils today, I would have to be really careful working around this masking fluid that we applied, but brushes are pretty flexible. So while you don't want to like scrub at the masking fluid, you have a lot more flexibility today, and that you can go over it without too much worry that your brush is going to lift any of that masking fluid. All right, so I just did an orange wash to this petal. Now I'm going to do the red to all the folds and veins. I like to start towards the tip of the petal and work towards the middle so that we can kind of start to develop a middle that is a little bit darker than everything else. And then I'm cleaning my brush, blotting it, and I'm going to lift in between some of the folds and veins that we drew on in step one. You don't have to lift in between every single vein. It's sort of a matter of preference, if you will. And now I'm going to finish this to the last step, and then we'll do the first part of the leaves while this dries. And then we're going to do one more layer for the underpainting for the hibiscus before we kind of start to get into some of the detail work. So I'm showing you today how to maybe do more of a realistic detailed flower versus fast and loose like some of my other classes have been. All right. Then red to all of the folds and veins. And then last but not least is just lifting a little bit with a clean brush with no paint on it in between some of the folds and veins. So far we're off to a good start with this first part one of two of the underpainting. And we're going to kind of let this set in before we do part two of the underpainting. And we're going to mix two more colors. We're going to mix the first two colors for the leaves. So I'm going to clean my brush here. I'm going to place 2 scoops of water into 2 more wells of my palette. So 2 scoops of water into 2 more wells of our palette. And again, if you're taking the live class, not watching the replay on YouTube, if I'm going too fast for you, please just do a couple of the petals with me. Don't try to do the whole hibiscus, or just do one leaf instead of both. And then you can always rewatch when this class is posted to the Michael Store YouTube channel and pause as needed to keep up. But I am under time constraints, and I really want to teach you guys really nice fine art techniques. And so unfortunately, that does mean I do need to move a bit fast so we can get through it in the hour we have. Okay, into this well of your palette, we're only going to mix sap green. So normally in my classes, I use a number 4 brush, but in today's class, we're using a 6. So the number 6 is a little bit bigger than a number 4. So that means when we used our brush like a spoon, it scooped a little bit more water into the palette than what number 4 would. So that means we have to do a few more passes of color into the well than we would with a number 4 in order to get the right paint to water ratio. So I put 2 scoops of water into 2 more wells on my palette, and into the first one, I'm only going to use sap green. So sap green is the lighter of the 2 greens in your set. So I'm probably going to do 4 to 5 passes of the sap green in order to get the right paint to water ratio. I want it to be at least an equal paint to water ratio, but I'm even fine if it's a bit more than equal paint to water ratio, if it's a bit thicker than that. And this does take some experience to even tell just by stirring if it's the right consistency. So I try to tell you this many scoops, this many passes, so that you can better duplicate it at home. But it's approximately 4 to 5 passes. Into the next, yes.
Sorry, really quick. I know you're working along fast here, but I just wanted to, if somebody didn't have the pocket box or the Sketchers box, and they had tubes, how would they mix colors that way? Would squeeze them out and mix, or do you just like squeeze out something and then sort of scoop like you're doing?
Yeah, so tubes are already wet, so it's not going to be the exact same as what I'm doing here unless you deposited them on your palette beforehand and let them dry, and then you can use them like they're cakes. So I would just put a very small amount of color and then just add a small amount of water because you want it to be a pretty thick mixture, but it's not, unfortunately, like an equal equivalent unless you had already let the little bit that you deposited dry so that you can use it like a cake. I hope that makes sense. So just do the best you can. You're going to want it to be 50 to 70% opacity, so it's a bit more paint than it is water.
Great, all right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Into the next one, we're going to do an equal number of passes of the sap green and an equal number of passes of the Virdian green. So I'm going to start with 2 of each and kind of get a feel for if it feels like the right thickness. And if it's not, I might add an extra pass of the 2, but I'm going to do 2 of each. And I like this color combo because it looks more like a true green, like more of a grass green than what either of these colors are on their own. Okay, so I ended up doing 3 passes of both to kind of get the right feel, the right mix. So we have a lighter green and then we have more of like a true green. And we're going to use these 2 colors on our leaves. So I'm going to clean my brush really quick. I'm going to swoosh it and dab it on my paper towel. And I'm going to pull this in so you can see the finished piece. I set that aside a second ago, but I want you guys to be able to see it. And what we're going to do to both leaves is we are going to apply the sap green color, so the lighter green color, to the upper 3/4. And then we're going to apply the darker green to the bottom quarter. So we're going to do that to both leaves. So I'm going to put a little bit of the sap green on my number 6 brush. I'm still using my 6. And I'm going to apply that to the top 3/4 of this first leaf here. And then I'm not even going to clean my brush because I'm moving from a light color to a darker color. So I'm just going to put the tip of my brush into the darker green and then just paint on the bottom quarter. And I'm going to be careful as I kind of work around the edges of my hibiscus. And I'm going to allow that darker green to just organically merge into the lighter green color. I'm not really going to fuss with where they meet. I'm just going to kind of organically let them merge and bleed into each other. And then I am going to clean my brush because I'll be moving from a dark color to a light color again. And then I'm going to repeat the same thing on this smaller leaf. And I had a little bit of paint on my finger there, so it got onto my paper, but that's not a big deal. And I'm going to paint on the upper 3/4, or I guess this one is more the upper 2/3. And then I'm going to put just the tip of my brush into the darker green, and I'm going to paint on the rest. All right. That's not too hard for those leaves, right? So that's the first step for the leaves. It's just those 2 colors. We're just kind of creating a wash and building up some good detail there. All right, so we're going to return to our hibiscus, and we're going to do the last part of our underpainting that is going to seem super strange to you, but I also think it's kind of fun. We're going to continue using the red wash, and we're going to essentially paint on stripes, like think candy cane stripes, onto every single petal. But we're going to follow the curve of the petal. So the middle will be straight up and down, but then they're going to sort of angle to follow the curve of the petal. And we're going to try and make the top of the stripe just a little bit thicker than the bottom of the stripe. And each stripe will be about 1/8 of an inch wide with maybe a 1/16 of an inch spacing in between. I mean, that's approximate, but each individual leaf is kind of going to look like a seashell when we're done with this step. So I'll demo for you. I like to always start in the middle of the petal. And so I'm just going to paint a straight line down, and then I'll probably just add a second one that makes the top a little bit wider. And then I'll put a little bit of spacing, and then I'm going to repeat that. And so each one I'm going to follow the curve of the petal. So they sort of fan out as I apply them. And I'm going to do this to every single petal. And this might seem really weird, but it's going to help build that dynamic look and build that realism. And I still consider this more of the underpainting because we're not really focusing on details yet. It's more just building up the dimension of the overall flower. So I'm going to do this to every single petal. I'm going to try and make the top of the stripes just a little bit wider than the bottom, and I'm following the curve of every single petal as I apply these stripes.
I just want to chime in real quick and just let you know we're about halfway through the class. Mandy's moving along swiftly. Everyone's trying to do their best, and it's looking fantastic. And just a reminder, guys, just take a deep breath and breathe. Mandy just wants to get everything on the video so that you guys can all watch this again if you need to. Within 24 hours on Michael's YouTube or michaels.com/classes.
All right, thank you, Colleen. So I'm just working my way around here doing my little candy cane stripes. I kind of feel like after this, actually after the next step, it kind of looks like something you might find in a coral reef. And you guys are all going to wonder, how is this going to come together? And I promise you it does. The step after the next one is like magical. It just kind of pulls it all together. And if you haven't watched some of my other classes, I really encourage you to go back because I build on my classes, the techniques that I teach. So we had already covered the wash we did in the Be Kind Wreath class I recently taught. We've covered how to layer flowers in my anemones class I taught last month. My class on Tuesday covered the wipe and lift technique. So I really invite you to rewatch a lot of my classes because it will likely feel a little less overwhelming for you if you do that, because I sort of introduce things in bite-sized chunks, whereas this one is a bit of a culmination of some of my previous classes in terms of techniques used. All right, so there is my little candy cane or seashell hibiscus here. And one other thing I'm going to do real quick is every single one of these petals, except for this one, overlap another petal on one side. So this petal is underneath this petal, and this petal is underneath this petal, and this petal is underneath both of these petals. So I'm going to also use my red wash, and I'm just going to apply it where two petals meet, but on the bottom petal. So on this petal, it's underneath this one. So I'm just going to pull my paint right where they overlap. This one is underneath this one. So I'm going to also apply some paint where they overlap. This is the only one that's underneath two petals. So I'm going to apply this paint on both sides. And this is going to be very helpful for us so that it will better distinguish petals from each other. And so that we'll know where we need to darken things to create a bit of a shadow where two petals overlap, just like on the final here. All right. So we are moving along. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we can put our number 6 brush aside for now. We're not done with it in its entire, actually, wait, we need to mix 2 more colors. So I take that back. Keep your number 6 brush. Let's mix 3 more colors. So I'm going to pull my Sketchers pocket box set back down, my water, my number 6, and I'm going to place 2 scoops of water into 3 more wells on my palette. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Into the first one, we are going to mix Alizarin Crimson, but it's not going to be the watered down one that I did initially. It's going to have the same paint to water ratio as the greens we mixed. So that means you're going to do 4 to 5 passes into that first well on your palette. All right, to get a thicker bit of a mix going. Okay. And then the next one we're going to mix is going to be black. So the Skechers Pocket Box set does not have black, but you can easily mix it. Sometimes I mix black by using the Cadmium Red Pale Hue and the Intense Blue. Sometimes I use it using the Ultramarine and the Burnt Umber. Today we're doing the latter. We're going to mix black by using the Ultramarine and the Burnt Umber. So I'm going to start by doing 4 passes actually of the Ultramarine Blue. I find blacks usually need more blue than anything. So I'm going to start with 4 passes of the Ultramarine Blue. Here we go. Have my 4th one, and then I'm going to add enough brown to it until it looks black. It's going to look navy at first, and then it will look like a nice, soft, natural looking black. If you get to the point where your mixture actually looks a little too brown, then you'll want to add more blue to it. But you'll see mine actually is starting to look a little sepia. So I'm going to add a little bit more blue to mine to make it look black. And then we're going to use this on its own later on, just in the center of the hibiscus. But for the most part in this class, we're going to use it to darken other colors. All right, so I have black now. It's just a nice, soft, pretty looking black. And then I'm not going to rinse my brush. Don't rinse your brush. Just go ahead and stir it into the next well of your palette. And then we're going to add red to that to make it a dark red. All right, so I'm going to add enough red to the black that I stirred into that well of my palette to make like a pretty mulberry color, like a dark red. And if you need to, if it ends up looking more like the red you just mixed, then all you need to do is clean your brush, dab it on your paper towel, and just take a little bit of black from what we just mixed and stir that in. All right, so I'll hold that up. So we have red, we have black that was mixed with the Ultramarine Blue and the Burnt Umber. And then we use some of this black we just mixed to add to this well, and we added red to it. So this one is red plus some of the black paint. And we're gonna use these to paint on the veins and to build up some detail work. All right, so.
Andy, can you hold up your final for everybody for just a quick second?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so I am going to switch to my number 2 brush now. For real this time, because I said that and I was like, wait, never mind. So I mean it this time. All right, so I'm switching to my number 2, and we are going to use this to apply the red to all of the veins and where petals overlap. And then we're going to use the dark red to apply also to the veins. But we're going to start with the red, and we're only going to use the red, and we're going to work all the way around this hibiscus. How we're going to apply the red? Well, first let's wet our number 2 brush. All right, so how we're going to do this is I'll start with this bottom one because this is the one I keep starting with. So I'm going to put some of that red on my brush, and I'm going to literally dab it onto the very base of the petal. And this is going to start to help build up that darker middle. So I'm just dabbing or dotting it onto the base of the petal. And then I'm going to sort of pull from this little puddle I just made, as well as use what's on my brush to sort of paint on all the petals and the folds, and also the area where this petal sits underneath the petal adjacent to it. So I'm just going to use my number 2, and I'm going to pull from that petal. I keep saying petal and puddle. They're both words I'm using today. Puddle to paint on all the veins that I painted on at the very beginning. And some of the veins you painted on have a bit of a Y shape. You can, if you want, fill in between the Y shape if you want to create a little bit of a darker look to your hibiscus. And of course, if you need to add more paint to your brush, please do. It's not that you can only work from the puddle, but work from the puddle as best you can, because it will kind of help pull the darker middle out into the rest of the hibiscus. And then just really try and follow those initial lines that you painted on at the very beginning. Not that you can't add more, but we kind of just want to use that as a guide. And then when you finish one, you're going to do the same thing to the next. You're going to dab on some right at the base of the petal. There, I caught myself. And then you're going to first apply it where the 2 petals overlap, the back of the 2 petals. This is a tongue twister. This is as big of a tongue twister as the Skechers pocket box set, Colleen.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. Puddles. So hopefully you guys
we know what you mean at this point.
Yes, that's good. All right. And then I'm pulling from this puddle to paint veins and folds onto the petal. And I'm filling in some of the Y shapes here at the very top of the flower. And again, you can always add a little bit more to your brush if you need to, more paint to your brush. And I'm just going to work my way around. We used this in the Be Kind class on the chamomile blossoms. We puddled a little bit of gray at the base of the petal, and then we pulled from it to paint on a couple of veins. So I really mean it when I say my classes all build on each other, and I'd love for you to go back and watch the other classes I've taught, because I think it will really serve you well in terms of understanding different techniques. And every single class I teach or teaches something new, whether it be something about color theory or it be a technique. So they're all free for you to rewatch. I provide written instructions when the Michaels stores post the video after the fact. I always embed those classes to my website, and I upload written instructions if that helps you follow along a little bit better. So I do everything I can to make sure you guys are successful.
I have been posting all sorts of links in the chat. So if anybody is interested, I have Mandy's website at www.mandypeltier.com. As she said, she's posting all her classes and links to the videos and everything. I have her next class, which will be on July 13th. She's doing, if we have time, I'm sure she'll show you at the end. Oh, there it is.
Now let's pull it up.
So the link is in the chat if you guys want to sign up for that. And then, just check her out on Instagram at Mandy Peltier Artist and follow along with her. That way you never miss a thing.
All right. So I'm on this petal that is underneath 2 petals. So I'm going to go ahead and drag the red underneath or on both sides. All right. So this one will look recessed underneath both petals it's adjacent to, or in between, I guess. And then I'm just going to keep painting on my veins and folds.
Really quick, Mandy. Carrie had just had a good question in the chat. If she wants to build on her techniques, what is the very first class do you think they should start with? What could they start with? Your snowflake, maybe?
Actually, that one's really straightforward. There's no like layering. It's just applying one color to one area. So I mean, they each teach something great, I think.
Me too.
And I mean, not that I'm partial or anything. So I think my Valentine's card class would be a good starting point. But I think if you really want to build up to be successful with this, start at my Be Kind wreath. And I think that would, and then every subsequent class after that, watch. And I think you would know enough to be successful with this. All right. So good question though. Thanks for that. Okay. So I just applied red to all of the petals. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the dark red, except now I'm maybe only going to cover 70% of all the veins. I'm not necessarily going to take the dark red and cover every single one like I did with the red, but it's going to be the same thing where I'm going to start by just puddling on some dark red at the base of the petal. And then I'm also going to apply it on the bottom of 2 petals where they overlap. And then I might just cover maybe 70% or so of the veins I applied red to. You could do all of them if you wanted. I mean, it's a stylistic choice. I kind of do more like 70% or so. And then you can also add this to those Y-shaped veins towards the top of a petal if you want, just to kind of create some shadow. So basically the dark color is going to look like shadow areas where the light is maybe not hitting it as directly. And so I'm going to repeat this process all around. This one's a little bit quicker because we kind of already have a framework to work with because we already applied red to everything, right? And we're not applying it to all of the folds or the veins. We're just applying it to about 70%. And you can even just apply it in part to some of the folds and veins. You don't necessarily have to go over the whole thing with this darker color. So this class or this step shouldn't take you as long as the red because we're not going for 100% coverage here. We're just kind of daintily 70% or so going over what we've already applied color to. All right, and so you can see by kind of puddling it towards the middle, we're starting to help the middle look darker, but for it to look naturally darker, not for it to be like this harsh circle in the middle. It will kind of bleed out on its own a bit organically, if you will. And I will say with this dark color, I'm also going to take it and I'm going to run it right under the style. So where we applied the masking fluid, so it will also kind of look like a shadow underneath the style. I think that's what it's called. I looked up the anatomy of a hibiscus before this class, so I wasn't just calling it the weird angled thing. So hopefully I'm not wrong in what I'm calling it, but all right. So now I'm going to move on to the petal that is underneath 2 petals. And I'm first going to apply that where it overlaps. And then I'll apply it to some of the veins. You can take as much time as you want on this or as little time as you want on this. I think the more time you spend and the more you take your time, the more realistic this will look. Obviously, we're moving at a rocket pace today. So this is what I think kind of looks like something you might see in a barrier reef. It kind of looks like coral or some kind of weird fish, but I promise it's all going to come together. It might look strange right now, but the next step is really going to have it all come together. So, but before we do anything else to the hibiscus, we're going to address the leaves again. All right. So to the leaves, we are going to paint on the veining, and I want to use my 0 for this. So we get some really nice thin lines. So I'm using my 0 round brush. I haven't used it yet, so I'm going to wet the bristles, dab it on a paper towel, and I'm going to use the darker of my 2 greens. And I'm literally in this step, all I'm doing is I'm going to just paint over the veins with my 0. Carefully. So I chose the 0 because it's really small and thin. And so it's a little bit easier to get those thin lines than it would be if we tried to use the number 6 or the number 2 and just using the tip of the brush. So I'm starting off on both of these leaves, just going over what I've already, what I drew on initially. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint on just little tiny veins going off of these main veins that I painted on. So I'll do one little area here and I'll hold it up so you can see. All right, so I just painted on little thin ones adjacent to the main thick one. Do you see that? Just little tiny hairs. And I'm gonna do that to all of them. Just paint on little tiny hairs off of all the, and I don't know that they're hairs, but that's sort of what they look like, off of the main veins on each leaf. And you can kind of pull from the paint that is still wet too. You don't necessarily have to add more to your brush, but I'm just going to paint on some of those onto every single little vein, just to create some texture on these leaves. I don't always do this, but in studying a hibiscus leaf, kind of mimics how they really are. They have a lot going on with them. It's more of a complicated leaf. I like dill. Dill is very simple to paint. It's just straight lines. There's no folds or anything like that. So I like simple leaves. But hibiscus is, a little more detailed than your typical leaf. All right. So now this is going to be the step that kind of helps it all pull together, and you guys will probably be surprised. I introduced this technique in my Be Kind Wreath class with the bee wings, where we applied a wash and it just softened the veining that was on the leaves. Well, that's what we're going to do here, except instead of just using water, we're going to use that red wash we used at the very beginning. So I can tell, actually my red wash is this one. So make sure you know which one it is. I don't have much left in my half pan here, so I actually need to mix more. So if you missed it the first time, I'll tell you how to do it again. So I'm going to place 4 scoops of water, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to do 3 passes of alizarin crimson, which is running your brush in the half pan a handful of times, and then stirring it into that well on your palette with the 4 scoops of water. And this creates a mixture that's a little more water than it is paint. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply this wash to each petal. I'm going to stop it when I reach the center here, or when I reach some of these edges where 2 petals overlap where it might still be a bit wet. But to this whole part here, I'm going to apply it to this whole part here, here. And this is going to make your hibiscus look red, and is also going to soften all of these veins we've just applied. It's pretty cool how it works. And it's not going to erase the veins you've applied. It's just going to soften them and make it look a little more natural. All right, so I'm just going to go through and I'm going to apply this red wash to each petal. And look at what a big difference that makes. And then while it's still wet, guess what we're going to do? We're going to swish our brush and clean it, dab it on our paper towel, and I'm going to do a little bit more lifting for value. So I'm going to take my wet brush and I'm just going to lift it a little bit in between some of the veins and folds. If you lift a lot, it's going to make your petal look really light. If you lift just a little, it's going to make the petal look darker. So I made another hibiscus here and I lifted a lot more. So you see how light this looks over here and how light it looks over here. So you can do some hibiscus petals where, like maybe this one that's underneath 2 petals has less lifting, but maybe this top one do a lot more lifting. So to save time today, I'm probably just going to do the same amount of lifting on every single petal, but just know that the more you lift, the lighter it's going to be. Okay. So I am now going to apply this wash to the next petal. So these detailed flowers, it's not a quick process. It does have a process, but it's methodical. It's a methodical process to build up the values. So then after you apply the red wash to the next petal, you can do a little bit of lifting here and there in between veins. Just rotate your brush as you lift, and you can always rinse the brush, dab it on a paper towel, and then lift a bit more. And you see how this is now really starting to look like this one. And it was all the wash. No longer looks like a clownfish.
Not that there's anything wrong with clownfish.
No, not at all. But, typically they're not red, but it just sort of, it's kind of funny how it goes through an ugly stage. A lot of my art goes through an ugly stage before it all comes together.
It's like all of us in middle school, right? Middle school, your awkward stages,
I love that.
To me, it actually looks like a heart, like the veins in a heart or something. I don't know. I'm just thinking more gory.
Yeah. I love how you think, and I love your analogy. Yes, that's so spot on. Like the awkward years. Yes, yeah. Art goes through awkward stages for sure before it all comes together.
Just a time check really quick too, Mandy. So we have 10 minutes. So you're doing great.
Okay. So
everybody just take a deep breath and don't be stressed. Everybody's doing great. You're trying your best. And if you need to, again, you can rewatch this recording in 24 hours at Michael's YouTube.
That's exactly right. So this class lasts just an hour, but the posted class will last for who knows how long.
As long as there's Michael's YouTube, there will be a Hibiscus Mandy Peltier.
Yes. Yes. So you can always rewatch. I feel like a broken record saying that every class, but it's true. And I think some of us just need that encouragement. So I'm working on the last petal here.
Sorry, just really quick too. Someone just asked, is the chat recorded too? And I thought everybody should know that actually the chat is not recorded. So if there's any links or information in the chat you want to grab, make sure you grab that, put it on a Word document or something for yourself, but it will not be on the recording.
Yes, that is a good, yes, that's a good point. I can't really follow the chat while I'm teaching. So that's why Colleen is here to help me know what you all need help with. All right. So I just want to show a couple of these spots. Like this is why we did the red candy cane stripes. This is why we did the orange wash. You can still see some of it peeking through even after you do the wash technique. And, this hibiscus maybe doesn't look as red as this one. So I could even repeat what I've done to even make it more red, where I do a few more veins and then do another wash on it. It all depends on how much detail you want to build up. But while this dries and before we finish this up, let's just do the last thing to our leaves. We need to just mix a quick color. We need to mix a dark green. So I'm just going to take a scoop of my darker green that we already have, just taking a scoop of it, and I'm going to stir it into a new well of my palette. I do have to quickly clean my brush, and then I'm going to do the same thing to the black. I'm going to take a scoop of the black. So I'm just mixing a little bit of the dark green and a little bit of the black to have a dark green color. And then I want to use my number 6 brush here, and we're going to do the same thing to the leaves that we did to the petals. I'm going to do a wash of color over each leaf to kind of soften the veins that we've painted on. All right, so I'm going to take a little bit of the sap green, and I'm just going to go over the whole leaf. I'm not going to add more green to my brush though. If I run out of paint to apply, what I'm going to do is put just the tip of it into my glass of water. And then I'm going to keep painting it on to cover that whole leaf. And then while this leaf is wet, I'm going to take some of that dark green and I'm just going to drop it in along the very bottom of the leaf where it meets the hibiscus, just to create a darker bottom than the rest of the leaf. So if you missed that on the first leaf, I'm going to go over it again because we have 2 leaves. All right, so I'm going to put a little bit of sap green on my brush and I'm going to go over the entire leaf. If I need to add more paint to my brush, I'm not going to. What I'm going to do instead is put just the tip of my brush into the water, and then I'm going to keep moving. On this one, I didn't have to do that. And then I'm going to put the dark green just along the base. So the leaves basically get the same treatment as the hibiscus. And then, do you remember how I said we might have to speed some things along with the heat gun? Well, this is what we're going to do now. I'm only going to aim it on the leaves to dry them. I don't want to dry the hibiscus, just the leaves. So I'm going to angle it on the leaves, dry it just a little bit here, each one. And then I'm going to do one more thing to these leaves. All right, I'm going to take my 0 and I'm just going to paint one more time over the main veins with that dark green, just to kind of carve them out a little bit, add a bit more detail. And you could spend a lot more time on these leaves if you wanted fussing with them. I'm not going to do that today since I still have to show you how to do the style and the filament, which does not take long at all. It's really quick. I bet before we do the style and the filament, so I just applied the dark green to the veins to help it look more like this one. All right, so what we want to do, one more thing we want to do to the hibiscus is we want to take our red paint, not our wash, our red paint. And I want to apply with my 0, I'm still using my 0. I'm going to apply some thin red veins to a lot of the folds on the petal. So I'm just going over them with my 0, so they're really nice and thin, just to kind of bring out the detail again. So you don't need to go over every single one. You can just go over maybe half on each petal and it will just sort of pull out a bit of the detail that was softened when we applied the wash. All right, so we're doing that. Every single petal, just apply to a few of the veins, your red, with the number 0, so it's nice and thin. Nice and thin. It will make it look nice and carved out. And then I'm also going to take my 0 and I'm going to run it where 2 petals overlap to those same spots, because we really want those spots to be dark, right? We want it to create a shadow. We want it to look like it is recessed under its neighboring petals. We don't want it to look like one big blob of a hibiscus. We want it to look like individual petals. So we're achieving that by slowly adding more and more color where petals overlap. All right, and then grab your 6 again. And I'm going to take some of the dark red. I'm going to dot it in the middle. All right, I'm just going to dot it all around in a circle in the middle. Clean my brush, dab it on a paper towel, and I'm going to do the same thing with black. I'm going to dab it in the middle, darken that up, and then grab your 0. And I'm going to pull from that puddle I made, and I'm going to just pull it up gently along where the petals overlap, just to create a bit more of shadow, to show that there's separation between the petals. All right. So I know that was fast, and mine is not as red as it was today, or as the final. So if I were making this at home, I would probably keep repeating the painting on veins and folds and going over with more of a wash. But because we don't have time to do that today, I want to show you how to do the anthers and the pollen. So I'm going to use my heat gun again, and I need to dry my hibiscus now, because you do not want to remove masking fluid while paint is still wet, or you're just going to smear the paint. All right, so I'm going to go over everything, and I'm going to dry it, make sure it's dry so that I can remove the masking fluid. If you don't have a heat gun at home, or if you don't have a hair dryer, you will want to wait for this to air dry before you move on to the next step of removing the masking fluid. It's just good practice to make sure you know, you don't smear paint anywhere where it doesn't belong, because then you might get frustrated. You may feel like you ruined your work or something. All right, so that's probably good there. So you can use your finger to remove masking fluid, but if you have any oils or dirt on them, you know, you may not want to. So I just take a little piece of paper towel, and I sort of crumple it up in my hand, and I use that to kind of pull at the masking fluid, and it will just kind of scrub it right off. And then I can wipe it away. So you can see how it just protected the paper. Where I applied it was protected, which is a cool little trick. I use this fairly often, and I've used it in some of my prior classes as well. So what we're gonna do to the style, so the style is the curvy line. I'm going to use my number 2 brush. My number 2 is here, and we're going to make a gradient. So at the very tip of my style, I'm going to use my number 2, just the very bottom of it, and I'm going to put some black there. I'm going to cover the very bottom of it with some black paint. So maybe 1/4 inch, maybe maybe 1/4 inch. Clean my brush, dab it on a paper towel, and I'm going to take the dark red, and I'm going to add the dark red to maybe 1/3 of what is left on the style. So I'm just going to move it up a little. So we've gone from black to a dark red. Clean your brush, blot it. Now take your red paint and apply that to about half of what's left. Okay. And then I'm going to place my brush in the water for just a second. Wipe it along the rim of the glass. I talk about this technique in my rooster class. And I'm going to paint on now a diluted version of this red paint color to the rest of the style. Not to the pads, not to those ovals, but to the rest of the style. So you can see we've created a gradient. We've gone from black to dark red to a light red or a pink. All right, by applying black and then dark red and then a wash of that red to the remainder. So now let's paint on these yellow pollen pieces. I'm going to just pull from my Sketchers Pocket Box set directly. I also do this in the rooster class. So I'm going to take my number 2 brush. I'm going to swish it in the water. I'm going to take my wet brush, and I'm just going to run it over my cadmium yellow, which is the darker of the 2 yellows in my set. And so I'm going to build up some of that on my brush. I'm going to hold my brush vertically, and I'm just going to dab it onto each of those circles. That was the pollen. All right, so I'm just going to dot it onto all of those, not to the pads, not to the ovals attached to the style, just to the little pollen pieces, the little circles.
As Mandy's dabbing, I just want to let everybody know tomorrow you will receive a survey. It's very quick. If you enjoyed today's class, please let us know. If there's something you would love to see from Mandy in the future, please put it in the comments. We do read about pretty much all of the comments. So that way we can see what you guys might like for future classes.
All right. And then what I'm going to do is the same. I'm going to still use my number 2 brush, and I'm going to run it into the burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is the lighter of your 2 browns in your set. It's more of the orange brown or reddish brown. And I'm going to dot that over the yellow. Just a dot though. I'm not going to fully cover the yellow. I'm just going to put a real gentle dot on each one so that everything we have going on has a couple of different values. I'm all about the values. So I just put a little dot of the burnt sienna over top of the yellow. And then as they bleed into each other and dry, there'll be a little bit of a nice shadow. All right. And then last thing is the pads here. Let's fill in the pads with the dark red. So the dark red, let's just color them in. And you're done. All right, so that is our hibiscus. I know it was like fire hose. I don't like these fire hose classes, but again, you can like pause as needed to keep up. You can repeat any of these steps as many times as you need. You know, I made one earlier today just as quick practice, and it turned out as red as this one. So sometimes like just the way you paint your paints, you might end up having a little more water and then a little more paint. So with this one, if I were doing this on my own at home, I would probably add more veins and another wash just to make it look more red. But if you want more of a soft pink hibiscus, you'd be good to go, I guess. But I hope that you will join me on July 13th for the Peachy class. This won't feel as overwhelming. This is a little bit of a smoother pace class, like my popsicle class on Tuesday. But one last thing, if you are not following me on social media, I would love for you to follow me. You can keep up to date with my Michael's classes and just know what I'm up to in general with art or with some of my interests and hobbies. So my handle on Facebook and on Instagram is at Mandy Peltier Artist. If you go to my website, mandypeltier.com, it's just my name. You can have access to free tutorials, all of the classes I've taught through Michael's, and you can just stay up to date with me that way. So I'm just switching to my other camera so I can say goodbye to you. And I just want to thank you for being here with me today. I love these classes and I love spending this time with you. Please post your finished work. Nothing makes me happier than seeing your finished product. And I know that that may be a few days from now if you want to redo it and watch the video, because I don't think the video will be posted until Monday. So, but if you finished it now, you can hold it up real quick. I saw someone try to hold it. Oh, wow. I'm impressed, Mary. Wow, that you were able to keep pace with me and do that. That looks great. So feel free to send me your finished work so I can see it. It makes my day seeing your art. So anyways, thank you and have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.